Okay, so we're actually recording this before NVIDIA announces its stuff for CES 2024. But at this point, I mean, everything to do with the new NVIDIA RTX 40 series Super lineup has indeed leaked. And yeah, I'm kind of curious as to what you guys think of this because, well, let's talk about the sort of the baselines here. Basically, the 4070, the 4070 Ti, and the 4080 now have or will have, likely by month's end, upgrades, super variants, and I mean, video cards here has actually just broken down all of the specs and revealed what the improvement is against the existing cards, and probably the least exciting one in terms of specs is the 4080 Super, where it's, you know,
Right.
the 4080 Super was using, I think, the AD103 processor, and it was almost fully enabled, but the 4080 Super gets the fully enabled version, a bit of extra clock, some extra CUDA cores, and apparently the fastest ever GDDR6X memory. I think the key thing about that is going to be not so much the performance level, because it can only be a slight boost over the 4080, but basically
Right.
it's all about the price. And if it's anything more expensive than $1,000, then it's basically DOA. $1,000, you kind of reach what you'd expect for price versus performance against the 4090.
Finally.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah, because like this was like the weird redheaded stepchild card where the 4090 looked like a great buy even at its like near 2K price, right? Just because the 4080 was so tragically
4080 is a
underwhelming.
great GPU, but the price
It's a
is
great
ridiculous.
GPU. The price just didn't make any sense. So
Yeah. Let's move on to 4070 Ti Super. 10% on cores, bit of extra clock, massive memory capacity upgrade. It's gone from 12 gigs to 16 gigs. It looks as though it's moving on to AD103 from AD104. So, you know, it's a larger chip as well. More memory bandwidth as well, because, you know, wider bus. I think it's 256, or I'm not sure. 100. It is going to be a 256-bit bus.
yeah, it
I'm
is
pretty
going to be
sure.
the 8103, etc.
Yeah, so that could be potentially quite interesting. It's all about the price, really, isn't it? And then you've got the 4070 Super, which is looking quite interesting, actually. A 22% increase on core count. A small increase to boost clock, but the same amount of memory. They've upped the TDP as well. So it should be quite a decent improvement over the 4070. And I guess they kind of needed that because the 7800 XT was rather good, right?
It's
From
a good
AMD.
GPU.
Question is, again, price, what they're going to do with that, and also what they're going to do with price for the 4070, because it kind of, I don't know, organically the prices have dropped on the 4070 already. The question is whether they're going to make that official. The question is whether they're going to be more aggressive with the existing 4070, which we understand remains in the circulation, and whether they're going to do more against the 7800 XT, which is always going to have more memory, right? So yeah, interesting stuff there. I'm curious what you think about this, Alex. It's basically, I think, you know, 4070 Ti, 4070 Super look like good enhancements to spec, but it's got to be met by decent price points.
Yeah, for me, it's mainly about the price here, because I think actually all, like you just said with the 4080, it is a good GPU if you don't look at the price, and then it's not a good GPU anymore. But if the prices are going down, if the increased performance is maintained at a similar price, like with that Ti, not with the Ti Super, sorry, with the 4070 Super. That is the one that's like the 20% CUDA core advantage. Then you're actually looking at that upper, I mean, what do you even call that kind of price range anymore? I don't know what you call it, but you're looking at that price range being a better buy, more in line with what you saw in previous generations, where, for example, like 3090, if that 4070 Super comes into 3090 territory instead of trading blows with a 3080, then you're looking at what we saw in previous generations, where the top end card would move down to the 70 tier, like 2080 Ti going down to 3070, that's a pretty historical thing that happened, at least since the TI cards have existed. So that is what I'm excited about. I would like that. The extra, like, it depends on really like what people are targeting to. That there's that TI Super. I don't know what the price will be, but like if you are targeting 1440p, I'm not sure it's a very interesting GPU necessarily. But if you are doing quote unquote 4K on a budget, it's not really a budget if it's this expensive, but if you're doing it on a not 4090, not 4080 budget, maybe then that extra frame buffer for 4K gaming. The one thing about NVIDIA's last generation of GPUs, and also I guess the 3000 series, is they've just cheapened out so hard on VRAM tiering. Like you can either get too much, arguably, or you get too little, and the midway point is somewhere where AMD is just way ahead with the 16 gigabyte on a lot of cards, or even the 12 gigabyte on cards that are competing with 8 gigabyte ones. So I like to see that they actually did make headway, and I think they locked themselves into this awkward position with how they stratified the chips this time around. Like, I'm very curious after this what happens with the 4060 series over time. Because that 4060 Ti is just weird. It's the 16 gigabyte version. But then you have like the 4060 Ti and the 4060, which, I don't know, they occupy a weird space in my mind where I have trouble recommending them because I'm worried about 8 gigabytes. I don't think it means you get a bad experience, but I want to always ensure people get a good experience. So yeah, I'm just curious if they're going to do anything with that later this year at some point. Cause
I think in this point of the generation, the 60 product should be as good as a console, right?
It really should.
And your 70 product should be a lot better. And we're kind of getting there with the 70 products, except that the 70 product is quite expensive, right? The 4060 is actually an okay price at $299, I think. But the issue is, and I've been thinking about this a lot, I mean, the 3060 is not that much slower, and it has 12 gigs of memory. Doesn't have frame generation, but there are other solutions coming. Like FSR3. That'll come good eventually, right? I think FSR3. It's not quite there at the moment. I mean, you're going to be looking at the hacks that are happening now, the mods that basically enable
that's one of the
frame
next
generation.
Videos.
Because a lot of people are looking at like Cyberpunk 2077 and they're on their 3080s and thinking, well, maybe I can get path tracing working on that, and that's an entirely viable thing that could happen if FSR3 is modded in and working correctly. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there. I mean, I'll be interested to see what's going on with the 40 series supers. It's just, I think that we're looking at sort of mid-tier tweaks as opposed to addressing the oddities like the 4060 having too little memory and the 4060 Ti. What's happening with that 16 gig variant? There were price adjustments, but it needs to be like a 399 or even a 350 card in my opinion. Oh
yeah, completely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the 3060 versus 4060 conundrum, more memory versus better features. It's a tricky one. It really is tricky.
It's one that the consumer really arguably shouldn't have to make, I feel.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the concept that a 40 series part should be outspec'd by a 30 series part in any dimension that has a meaningful impact on the gameplay experience is kind of nuts, isn't it?
Especially for the core tech purpose of ray tracing, which is what the RTX brand is really about in a lot of ways, other than DLSS, like where you could maybe be memory outcompeted to use RT on a 4060 versus a 3060, which I think is actually something that could occur in games targeting stuff like Series X. So
yeah, I mean, John, you're sitting there with your 4090. You're happy as Larry,
just laughing,
as all of us are. I mean, I think, right? We all have those.
Yeah, sure, but I
John, do you
I
have
enjoy
a
using the
XTX.
No,
like
I do like to see
you
what
have
other
one?
I do enjoy seeing what other graphics cards can do, because the 4090 is stupid expensive. It costs a ton. But the thing is, though, with the way GPUs are currently, I still feel like the GPU is good enough at this point. The problem is the CPUs and everything else when it comes to gaming performance. right?
Right.
Like I feel like the speed at which new GPUs are coming out, like, oh, we're talking about all the 50 series coming up and all this, and you mentioned that features have to be big, and I think part of that is just down to the fact that the CPUs are being left behind, and these GPUs are getting so fast. It's like, it feels like there's Sonic tapping their foot, just waiting for the CPUs to catch up, right? Like, it is, that's the bottleneck in most games these days still, and which, you know, the rise of frame generation obviously is designed to mitigate that somewhat. But that continues to be my struggle, is CPU. It's always CPU. It just can't keep up. And I think, you know, faster graphics cards released later this year, but even these mid-range ones that we're talking about and the supers and everything, I think they're going to be more than good enough for any rig out there, and it will basically eliminate, for the most part, the GPU as your major bottleneck in a system.
Yeah, for a good amount of time,
for a while.
For like most titles that don't use path tracing. That's correct. It's literally the only frontier where the GPU starts to struggle at this point in time. 4090 is just so ridiculous.
And there's not that many path traced games right now, right? It's cool. Yeah. I'm happy that they exist, but it's still relatively rare, and I don't expect it to become that common outside of games that NVIDIA themselves gets behind to push that technology, right?
Agreed.
So,
okay.
I don't know. That's basically my thought. GPUs are in a weird spot because of that.
We got a couple of supporter questions about this. This one from perfect_organism. If you ignore the supers on the horizon, I can pick up a 4080 for as low as £999 in the UK. Quite a bit off the MRRP, but obviously not as great as the 3080 at launch. Any thoughts about its place in the market at that price? Well, you know, that's what I'd expect the 4080 Super to launch for. So I wouldn't be buying that. I'd be expecting the 4080s to be end-of-lined and sold off at a discount. So, yeah, basically wait for the Supers there. This question, which did make me chuckle, from Diego Elve. Hey, DF, hypothetical situation. Alex needs to recommend a new gamer a GPU. The RTX 3050 6 gig, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is $179. The RX 7900 XTX is also $179. Does Alex still choose the 3050 because it has DLSS?
So, I mean, to troll, I would say yes. But to be extremely realistic, I would never, ever recommend a 6 gigabyte 3050 unless you're really desperate. Even versus, it has nothing to do with the AMD card at this point. It's just like, I recently got helping my brother get a laptop for someone that he knows. And there's like I don't know what it was. It was maybe like a 4054 gigabyte GPU in there. And I was just thinking like, what is this GPU? Like it barely, for the modern gaming, like you can barely do much with 4 gigabytes. Like a lot of games are going to have serious issues. So it's basically a productivity GPU at that point.
Well, you know, the point is though that the 7900 XTX will run games at native resolution higher.
I'm trashing these cards because I don't like them in general. I wanted to trash the 3050 because I don't like it, but in this case, yes, 100% the 7900 XTX. You could run a game at like 4 times the resolution, regardless of DLSS with native TAA, even with things like better ray tracing. Like it's a no-brainer.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, it's coming soon, the 3050 6 gig. It is essentially a done deal at this point. I think there have been enough rumours and leaks, and it looks as though NVIDIA is finally killing the entire GTX line. The 1650, which they've sold millions of those things. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, right.
It's going, and RTX 3050 becomes the new baseline. Apparently, a $180 price point for that. I've put here on the docket it's a bad idea, but it's actually, thinking about it, a good idea for NVIDIA, isn't it? Because, you know, the 1650 proved that they, you know, as long as there is a cheap GPU out there that is by NVIDIA, people are going to buy it more than the competition, even though the competition could be a whole lot better. If you think about what $180 does with an RK750, it will annihilate the 3056 gig.
It will destroy it.
The thing that also annoys me about the 3056 gig is the concept that they've actually reduced the specs on the 3050.
As if it wasn't bad enough.
Yeah, which already was, when it came out, I was expecting it to do 2060 performance, and it didn't even do that.
No.
And that was a bit of a disappointment to me. So to take that and to reduce the memory, which will in turn reduce the memory interface, which will in turn lower performance, that's just kind of not great. It's not very good at all. But at least budget gamers do have better options. It's just, the kind of 1650 prove that people are just going to buy the 3056 gig anyway, which is a bit depressing, but there we are.
I wonder if it is sometimes market penetration, like you just can't get an AMD GPU at a local retailer somewhere that has cards of this. I'm talking about like
surely people are buying
yeah.
online for the most part these days.
Have you seen any of these on Facebook Marketplace, Rich?
Well, these ones aren't out yet, so
no. But just graphics cards.
Oh, there's a huge amount of them. I've got to say, Alex, I did see a deal which I was kind of tempted by. It's just that the outlay was too much. It was 40 classic GPUs.
Ooh,
whoa,
interesting.
In a box for £500.
Oh, but was there a listing of all of their names?
Nope, just pictures of them. So I could see that they were kind of from the Hawaii and AMD generation, maybe some of the corresponding NVIDIA ones at the time, which would be Kepler. Yeah.
Early Kepler. I've always been kind of curious about, like, I don't know. There's some GPUs of that era that I wanted just to see how they fare out over time, like 4 gigabyte variants of the Kepler series.
Yeah,
those are ones I'm always curious about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, you know what would rule, guys? If we were able to set up like the DF PC gaming museum and just have every generation of PC games represented with appropriate hardware and like all these different graphics cards and like really discuss all the history about them.
Isn't this Alex's flat?
I mean, if you look underneath this desk, which I I will not show this. There are 12 different PCs around here of different eras. The whole idea is like, there's eras that I'm more interested in than others because the hardware variation is much higher. Like as soon as you get to like past 2012, it's a little bit less interesting because cards are just like DX12 class and they just run everything better over time. But then you like get below that and each year is like a different version of DX and different spec almost. It gets crazy, like around the turn of the century, to say that.
I mean,
phrase.
I'm big into 90s graphics cards. I've got like 30 of them or something at this point. Like all the different variants. I love that stuff. It's so fun. Yeah.
90s GPUs.
Because like
2000 GPUs.
Like you say, Alex, the difference in the way that they even like present their rendering is so different from graphics card to graphics card that it's actually interesting to see it, especially when you deal with like special, unique, bespoke APIs for that card.
Right.
And the fact that it's like, oh yeah, this Matrox card, this G400 had special, like the environmental bump mapping, of course, back in Expendable, stuff like that, which was absolutely just wild to see. At the time, I love it.
There's also crazy things that you almost get a little bit today of when you were talking about that GTX 1650 is just cards of the same launch year but with extremely stratified features. Like the 2000s era ATI would launch cards all the way from DX7 up to DX9 in the same like host of GPUs. Can't even imagine that today. You can't even play some games on that DX7 GPU, but they do it. It's crazy.
Let's not forget the GeForce 2 MX series, the MX card, the GeForce 4 MX, which was the most egregious use of naming I've ever seen.
It's a GeForce 4. Why not? It's got to be good. 4.
Oh wait, it's an MX.
We have GeForce 4 at home.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just thinking actually, we've had the obviously with NVIDIA we've got the TI, we've got the Super. Now we should have the egregious.
The egregious. Yeah. Hey, they brought back TI. I mean, that was a thing for a while. They brought back TI. I'm sorry, TI.
I'll never forget. What about the GTS, the RTX GTS TI?
GTX TI Quadro. I don't know. What are some other?
Because before GTX, there was GTS, like the GeForce 2 GTS and everything. That's what I'm thinking of.
We need a 5090 egregious.
5090 egregious.
What if they brought back the Voodoo, the 3DFX Voodoo name somehow for like I don't know, like a series of if they could turn it back into a prestige brand somehow, I don't know.
They could boutique this. They have all
I would love
the
to see
specs.
that, right?
They could FPGA it. They could do whatever they want with that, but they don't. They should bring back Banshee. They should bring back.
Should they?
Yes, because
It's better than the Rush at least.
it's better than the Rush. The Banshee is better than the Rush.
The Banshee's okay.
So look, on the Intel side, they've got code names that correspond with letters of the alphabet, right? So when we get to the 5th generation, it's got to be Evil Commando.
Evil Commando. Still my favorite name. Yeah.
Okay, enough of this nonsense. Enough.
Nonsense.